So in this section, we're going to continue to develop our application. Now remember that we've already created a component called hemisphere display. So in this video, I just want to import this hemisphere display into the index.js file. And then down inside the render method, rather than printing out the latitude right here, I want to show the hemisphere display component instead. So the goal here is not to show the user their latitude. The goal here is to show the user which hemisphere they are on. Okay, so let's do it, right? At the very top of the index.js file, I'm going to import hemisphere display from hemisphere display. Now remember, we already created that component and it's inside the same directory, which is why we use the // right there. So now down inside of my render method, I'm going to find where we are currently printing out the latitude. And I'm going to remove that. Instead, I'm going to create the hemisphere display component. And when we create this thing, we're going to need to tell the hemisphere display what the latitude of our user is. And then the hemisphere display component figures out whether or not it is north or south. So we have to take our latitude, which remember is stored inside of our state object, and somehow get that value of state, pass it down into the hemisphere display component. So what are we going to do? Good idea. We're going to use the prop system again. So I'm going to add on a new prop with the name latitude, and then I will assign it a value of this.state.latitude. So now we're taking a property from the state on the app component and passing it as a props down into the hemisphere display. And as you can see, the two systems of props and state are far more clear now. I hope you can see that. So we can take state from one component and pass it as props down to the child, in this case, the hemisphere display. So now the hemisphere display is linked with the app component. And I know you can remember that anytime we call setState, the component updates itself, and that's going to cause the hemisphere display to be updated as well. Because if that latitude property right there changes, the new latitude value is going to be put into hemisphere display. And then hemisphere display component will be rendered as well, like dominoes. So anytime we call setState, that component renders itself. But in addition to the component, it will also render any children that it is showing as well. We'll see some really good examples of this over time. So now let's go to our hemisphere display component. Remember also, anytime that we pass a props into a functional component, it's going to show up as the first argument to that functional component, and we always refer to it as props. So inside of that object, there should be a latitude property that contains our user's latitude. Let's see it. So I'm going to do a console log of props.latitude. Then save this and let's check out the browser. Okay, my latitude is right here. So now we've got that latitude inside of our hemisphere display component. We're going to start to write some code inside of this component to determine whether it's the northern hemisphere or southern hemisphere. Can't wait. But we're going to take a pause right here before we go on to the next section. How's that for suspense?